Shabbat shalom. I hope that, well, it's a blessing for you all to join us, and I hope today's will be a blessing to you as well. So, with that said, I think, hey, shall we just kind of let's do some of the pre stuff instead of putting it at the end. We'll just put it here at the beginning. But anybody that has an offering to give or a tithe, and you would like to give it here to this ministry, we would certainly appreciate it. And I'm going to put up a banner there for you all to have that. Let me do this. Here we go.
You're taking the spears?
All right, so yeah, you can just go to www.lifeofworshipamarillo.org where you can tap or click the donate button, and we'd certainly appreciate that as well. Especially our costs have increased because we're meeting at hotels now.
Costs have increased a lot.
So we certainly appreciate everybody's help to help us continue with our ability to gather in a place that is more conducive for our not only our fellowship, but hopefully for everybody that's online with us. And now, in regards to the broadband and the Wi-Fi, we're praying that it holds up. We don't know anything about this one. They said it would be adequate, so we're praying that there are no issues. But if I freeze or buffer, y'all just stay with us on it as we work through this. And is that it? I think that's all we need to talk about. So let's open in prayer. And Terry, would you open us up in prayer? We've missed you.
Together, we say thank you. We praise your holy name. Father, we thank you for bringing us here. We thank you for giving us a mind to want to follow in your footsteps and to read your Torah as it's written. Father, to dig and to seek your face. Father, we thank you for the many blessings that we've had over the years, for life, health, strength, the loved ones we've known and will know. Father, we ask that you bless the continuance of this ministry. Bless John and Sandi and Killian and Jonathan and the babies, the ones here and the ones that may be to come. We don't know. That's up to you. But Father, we thank you and we praise you and we bless your holy name. Father, bless the reading of your word. And we ask this in your name. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Okay, we are in the new Torah portion for Lech Lekha for this year. And does anybody know what Lech Lecha means? Get yourself. And so did you know that there's another way to say that that's actually maybe more literally accurate? How about this? It is for your benefit that you go. Well, that's a good thing, right? That's pretty cool. It's for your benefit that you go. And now when we go back and we think about this Torah portion, then in summary, what is it? Avram gets a word from Yahweh to get up and go. And that's how the Torah portion begins. And where does he go? He goes on the journey. He heads to the land. He camps out, says, well, wait a minute, there's a drought going on in the land. And so let me go down to Egypt. And then he comes back out of Egypt. And then he settles back down again. And then he's got to go to war. And then he's got to, well, he splits with Lot. And then he goes to war. And then he's like, Sarah says, you need to have a baby. And so here's my handmaiden. And so they have a baby and she gets mad. And so that's where it leaves off. I'm just summarizing it. I know there's more to it. Pastor Sandi should just do the Torah portion. Shall we just do that? I'll hand off today.
And last week and the week before.
She'll always give me a groan when she disagrees. But when I say that, it's just that's on the surface of the reading, and there's always more to dig out from the reading itself. So, but that's it in a nutshell. So, y'all want to go home, or we ready for worship? The reading is from Genesis chapter 12, verse 1, and it's going to go through chapter 17, verse 27. That's why it's packed. That's why I just mentioned all those things, because there's a lot in there, and there's just never enough time to go over it. But we're gonna attempt at highlighting some things as well this time around. We may just do some breakdown on the reading, and So if I could get someone to start out, because I think always starting out at the beginning of the Torah portion is very important. And one of the things is, because of the sake of time, 5 chapters is a lot to read, or 5 chapters.
Especially when you're late.
And so we don't want to take up the midrash time. So we always recommend read the Torah portion before we gather, so that way you're ready to come in, and anything that the Ruach just enlightens you, just speaks to you about, that you can bring it to the discussion as well. And so if I could get someone to read chapter 12, let's just go ahead and let's do chapter 12. Speak real loud, because the speaker's right here, or the microphone's right here. And or if you want to come closer to the microphone, it does pretty good, but at certain distances.
Genesis chapter 12, verse 1. Keep reading until you tell me to stop.
Yeah,
correct?
go ahead and read through chapter to verse 20.
Then Yahweh said to Abram, get going out from your land and from your relatives and from your father's house to the land that I will show you. My heart's desire is to make you into a great nation, to bless you, to make your name great, so that you may be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, but whoever curses you, I will curse. And in all your families of the earth will be blessed. So Abram went, just as Yah had spoken to him. Also, Lot went with him. Now Abram was 75 years old when he departed from Haran.
Yep, it's good enough.
Okay. Abram took Sarai, his wife, and Lot, his nephew, and all their possessions that they had acquired, and the people that they had acquired in Haran. And they left to go to the land of Canaan. And there they entered the land of Canaan. Abram passed through the land as far as the place of Shechem, as far as Moreh's big tree. The Canaanites were in the land then. Then Yahweh appeared to Abram, and said, I will give this land to your seed. So there he built an altar to Yah, who had appeared to him. From there he moved to the mountain to the east of Bethel, and erected his tent with Bethel to the west, and to Ai, the
Yeah.
east, Ai,
No.
to the east. And then he built an altar to Yah and called on the name of Yahweh. So Abram kept on journeying southward. Now there was a famine in the land. So Abram went down to Egypt to live as an outsider there, because the famine was severe in the land. Just as he was about to enter Egypt, he said to Sarai, his wife, look, please, I know that you are an attractive woman. So when the Egyptians see you, they'll say, this is his wife, and they'll kill me, but they'll let you live. Please say that you are my sister, so that I'll be treated well for your sake, and my life will be spared because of you. When Abram came to Egypt, the Egyptians did see the woman was very beautiful. Indeed, Pharaoh's officials saw her, and they raved about her to Pharaoh. Then the woman was taken into Pharaoh's house, but Abram was treated well for her sake, and he got sheep, cattle, male donkeys, male and female slaves, female donkeys, and camels. But Yahweh struck Pharaoh and his household with great plagues because of Sarai, Abram's wife. So Pharaoh called Abram and said, what's this that you did to me? Why didn't you tell me that she was your wife? Why did you say she is my sister, so that I took her into being my wife? Now here is your wife. Take and go. Then Pharaoh instructed men concerning him, and they expelled him with his wife and everything that belonged to him.
Okay, very good. All right, and I appreciate you reading that, because it's really key in as it launches us into this Torah portion, and of course, one of the things that, if I don't know, has anybody ever counted how many times has Yahweh talked to Abraham in this Torah portion? How many times is there this exact conversation going on? Does anybody know specifically? There's 5 times that Yahweh speaks to Abraham in this Torah portion, which is, actually it's a lot. I mean, this is like a face-to-face, voice-to-voice type of discussion. And of course, when it starts out, now Yahweh said to Avram, go forth from your country and he starts out with this promise. And what is this promise really launching him into? It's more than just a promise, a covenant.
God's chosen people to inhabit the land fully.
Right. So it is this link about really a covenant word that's given to Abraham to lead this journey. And it's like, well, when the children of Israel, when they left Egypt, they were given a promise. What was the promise that they were given? The land. It said, hey, the land that was promised to your father Abraham, and it was based on covenant. So them actually leaving the land was connected to covenant. And so covenant is actually very important here, because we see elements of covenant that is actually, shall we say, solidified with blood through circumcision. So the circumcision, covenant, and a destiny is connected together. Now, what is this other connection that I want us to be looking at during this Torah portion? Is that the covenant leads to our inheritance. Our journey to our inheritance is through covenant. There we go. That's probably the best way. Our journey to our inheritance is through covenant. In other words, when the children of Israel, when they left Egypt, that first generation chose not to enter into covenant, so they did not receive their inheritance. Now you say, well, wait a minute, what happened at the mountain? What happened at the mountain? Yes, there was a marriage covenant that took place, which they violated. And they chose not to listen to Yahweh's voice. And when they chose not to listen to his voice, they were not allowed to enter into the land. They couldn't receive their inheritance that was promised through the covenant. It had to be to the next generation. So when we think about Abraham, there's a lot weighing on Abraham right now. And if we go back in terms of a little bit of Abraham's, and we call him Avram at this point in time, he doesn't have the hay in his name at this point in time. But if we think about his family heritage, what is his family heritage? They were idol worshipers. Yeah. In the book of Jubilees, it says that he went in and he torched all of his family's idols. I mean, he just burned them all down. And then he admitted it. Yep, I did it. And so, because why? There was something inside of Abraham that he knew that was wrong. What do you do when you're raised in a family that doesn't believe in the creator of the universe, the ones that doesn't believe in this covenantal language, that doesn't believe in Yeshua? What is it about being raised in a way that is ungodly, it's unrighteous, and yet know within your heart it's not right, it's not the right way of living? Think about that calling that was in Abraham's life that says, wait a minute, there's something wrong with this lifestyle. So anybody that was not raised by believing parents, how did you come to Yeshua? What was that motivation within you that said, wait a minute, there's just something wrong with my parents' lifestyle that I don't agree with? Or what is it that's like, well, this is the way my parents lived, this way I live, but then something arrested our heart at some point in time and captured our heart and our mind and said, no, I need to come to Yeshua. That is the way. What is it? Because how many people that are out there, there's an awakening going in the land right now. And you realize that this is a generation that was an ungodly generation raised by ungodly parents that did not watch over their children, that did not raise their children in the word. And yet a supernatural event is going on at least in the United States right now. I think it's worldwide, because the impact and it all has to do with the assassination of Charlie Kirk. I've talked about that, but it's worldwide. It's really significant.
Isn't that what happens when a seed goes into the ground? Then that is when life comes forth.
Yes.
And so what you had with when someone of faith is taken away, that has left an impact, then naturally the seed should bring forth, multiply in great number. The same with the word in our lives, the same with, well, and bad seed multiplies too. Think about weeds. In fact, it seems to multiply pretty easily. But when a seed goes to the ground, it dies, but yet it brings forth life, multiple in multiplication. So that's normal and natural.
I think that's a really good point. And this is also to really speak to us. What about us? I mean, are we on a journey that we may not receive our inheritance? Have we entered into a covenant and yet have the possibility that we may not receive the inheritance that we've dreamed about?
Okay, but here's the deal. Yes, I do believe that we should prosper here and prosper and not just in finances and other ways. I do believe that's part of it. But most people, if you ask them if you're a believer, what your inheritance is, they're going to name a lot of things. But guess what our inheritance is? Terry.
Heaven.
It's the land.
Yes, it's Israel.
If we think that our inheritance is something else, yes,
Yeah.
the land and the kingdom of Yah, but that we think so many think it's the pie in the sky that's down there. That's not what it is. I'm not saying heaven's pie in the sky, please me. We are to go to the promised land, and if we are the bride, we are to reign and rule with our Messiah Yeshua, and that is our inheritance. And that is why we need to watch our lives, because the concubine and the harlot and all those others, whatever category we fit in, are not going to share in rule and reigning. And so when we think that, oh, our inheritance is the blessing and all of that, well, that comes from our obedience. The blessing and curse comes from our obedience on what we choose to follow his word. So I just think most people are very confused on what our inheritance truly is.
Yeah, go ahead, Michael.
Something that you just mentioned that kind of made me think is just like, people are hungry for the truth and they're starving for real supplements. We're so used to junk food and having to eat so much of it to feel bloated and to feel satisfied. But man, if you eat just the right types of very few handfuls of fruits and vegetables, you can get far more satisfaction and more out of that for your body's nutrients. So I feel like that's kind of like how the word is kind of affecting people nowadays. Like it's actually filling them with real truth, real hope, real faith.
Mm-hmm.
And that's real waters of life that aren't poisoned. Like when truth is spoken, that is like, I feel like speaking the truth is part of the covenant. Like it's part of what comes out of that. Like it's a byproduct in a sense. Like the nutrients of speaking truth and receiving truth is like a byproduct of the land flourishing with the right type of ingredients. And that's kind of how I feel like the promised land is. It is the right lands that Yah chose. It is where he wanted the chosen place to be. And I feel like that's kind of, I'm sorry if I'm confusing, but I feel like that's kind of significant in a way. I don't know how to put that together all the way together, but I feel like that was what it was intention was. It's like you got all these other things out here, and yeah, they can be okay, but this is what I specifically here on earth, like heaven on earth. This was the place I chose, Israel. This is the chosen land. This is where it's all really going to come down. Everything else flows from here and comes out.
Well, everything here, his kingdom is going to be duplicated, and it is in heaven, so let it be on earth.
So, but I feel like in the physical and the flesh, when the two will come together at the
As
end,
one,
yeah, it's like all the nations,
like the ladder of Jacob,
yeah, they'll come flocking to that because that's where it flows from, the original source, the place where God.
And I think one of the things that, if you go to the garden, what was happening at the garden? Did Adam have a covenant with the?
Absolutely.
Okay, so if he had, so think about this: he was experiencing his inheritance in the midst, and yet, because didn't listen to the voice of Yahweh, that inheritance was cut off. So think about how that connection is. And so you can flip it on the other side, that, and I apologize for my screen blanking out there because I was pulling up my eSword. So if you think about this, if we listen to the word or the seed of the serpent, that brings the confusion, or it destroys our ability to listen to Yahweh. Okay, so think about this. So in other words, our ability, I want to say that to get to this, our ability to hear the voice of Yahweh is directly correlated to our ability to circumcise our mind, by which we cut off the voice of the world, we cut off the voice of the serpent, by which now we've been set apart. Now we can truly be a person and a people who can get up out of here and head on this journey to go to this place of our inheritance, because it's only when our mind gets muddied with the voice of Hasatan, the voice of distraction, the voice of that divides us, causes us to even be divided among ourselves, it directly correlates to our inability to receive our inheritance. Go ahead.
What I was going to say is, when you said that it is our ability to hear the voice, well, when we are walking in deception or sin, our ability to hear the voice, our eyes are scaled and our ears are plugged so that we can't. But where did it start? So let's go with the garden and then compare to what Abraham's journey is, because Abraham right now is saying, I don't know where I'm going, I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm going to risk many things to go on this journey of the unknown. So he hearkened and he listened and he was attentive to it. What happened in the garden, and we mentioned it earlier this week as we were talking, it wasn't the eating of the forbidden fruit, so to speak, where it all started. It started because someone was failing to guard the boundaries and the borders, and Hasatan crept in. So think about it in our life. Sin doesn't just happen.
No.
Sin starts because we're not guarding the boundaries, we're not guarding the borders, and we have the same role and the same mission to take dominion and authority, to walk in his power and his authority and make disciples, etc., etc. We have that same job, but who we hang with, what we put in front of our eyes, what we consume, because if yes, we need physical food, but if we're not consuming his word on a daily basis, if we're not gathering and consuming that way, then we are starving, and the likelihood that we will not guard the borders and that the enemy can come in and creep in is going to happen. Now, that happened at the garden. So where was the first mistake? Failure to guard. Does it happen in our lives? Absolutely. So now let's walk over to Abraham. Abraham, I gotcha. Abraham is over here, and he is standing up in the midst of great trial. And if you read some, it even talks about in the apocryphal books, it even talks about him being, they tried to burn him in a fire, and it all of that didn't happen, etc. But Abraham is risking many things that happen to go on this journey, and yet he is still guarding, because three of the main things in life that are, when you go on a big journey period, you risk your reproduction, because what if your wife isn't with you? How are you going to multiply, etc.? You risk your finances, and you risk your reputation, because where you are is established as your reputation. He's risking all of that, and he's traveling, and he doesn't even know where he's going. It says he gathered everything he had, so he had to walk in that obedience, and he had to be able to be so close that he could hear. So my next question is, are we close enough to hear, and are we willing to go on the journey and literally put our lives in his hands? Because journeys back then, and honestly today too, if we did something like that, are dangerous and they're costly. Mm-hmm. Are we willing to pay the price as we guard the borders of our own life and go on the journeys he's asked us to go?
Well, he also gave up his stability because he was in a stable life. He gave
Well,
that up for the unknown.
And he was not stable again, because what do we read about Abraham? He's crossing and he's crossing and he's crossing and he's crossing.
That's why he's called the Hebrew.
He's crossed over.
Well, he pretty much gave up his life. I mean, you got to be willing to give it up if he tells you to.
And there are moments when he wasn't guarding quite as much maybe as he should be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's the same with our lives. What are we guarding? Our boundaries? Are we guarding our borders? Are we protecting what God has given us? So,
meaning that's a topic that has come up in all of them. So distraction, I think for us especially, I don't know what distractions Abraham might have had. I mean, he didn't have this, and he
Law?
didn't have,
Lot?
yeah,
Was it
maybe
distraction?
so, that maybe so, but we just have distractions, and yes, it's sometimes hard to turn those distractions off, or it is for me. I should speak only for Joy, but I have a hard time with that. I just got to think, well, I've got to get up and go do this, and I'll sit there and be trying to read, and I think, oh man, I gotta, I need to go do that. And it's hard to get those things out of your purview, out of your mind.
But that
it
is
is for me anyway.
That's what he wants. He wants us to be so distracted and so busy
Yes.
that we don't hearken to his voice,
Yeah.
and that we say we don't even have time for that intimacy. And one thing that when you read the word that's so important, when he talks about eating the flesh of that you will drink my blood and eat my flesh, when we're talking about what the world will call communion or all of that, it was really referring, when you get down to it, it's about intimacy. And we don't understand it in this culture and in this language, but that food, reference to food like that is about intimacy. Oh, it was something I was going to go in if I got to teach the Torah.
That's good. That's exactly what it
Because
is.
there's more to it than that. And the loss
Hunger.
of intimacy happens through distraction. And then it becomes, we are unable to correctly guard, and the enemy is going to creep into our lives and our families' lives and our children's lives.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that Abraham did do, since you brought up distraction, is that even though his family, specifically Lot, was a distraction, he didn't let it affect his walk. And he didn't even let it affect his position, because that's my nephew. This isn't what he said. He's a screw up in some areas, but so he didn't say, well, I'm going to stay away. He's like, I'm going to go take care of business. And then there, through all of that, there's a recognition of what a great man he is. And he's like, here's our stuff. And the king, and he's like, I don't want your stuff, because I don't want you to tell me you're one that made me rich. You know what? He was still looking and saying, my source is Yah, my source is God. And of course, then he brings forth the tithe to Shem and the Melchizedek king. And so you see that constant trust most of his life. I'm sorry, there's more I want to say, but it's going to take us in a different direction.
Keep going.
Well, okay. So where are we looking at the exception?
You should turn the camera to you.
No,
Having a child.
having a child. But let's start first with him going to Egypt. So he goes to Egypt because of a famine. And of course, why go to Egypt? Because Egypt's by the Nile. They got the Nile, the Pishon. He's got the Nile River, and there's life and there's food, and you're there. Now, so many times, have you ever wondered why was Sarah taken into Pharaoh's tent or Pharaoh's harem? Well, we forget that in travel, even back then, there were taxes. And they would literally, if you traveled to Egypt or to another land, you can even see some of the places where you had to pay up. They would go through everything you had, and you would have to pay the taxes on it to enter in, the custom fees. And so that is probably, no, well, don't you know, that's when she was noticed by the guards, is they're going through his stuff, thinking, how can we gain here? And they're like, well, man, Pharaoh like her. And so,
yeah.
And that's how she was taken in. And of course, in his weakness, he's like, hey, you're my sister, da 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 da. But Yah uses that, because then we see the same plagues hitting there as we see in the Exodus as well, with Pharaoh telling him to get out, them leaving with great wealth. Anyway, go back. I'm going blank right now. But we see that happening. But in his weakness, Yah can turn it around to his glory. But he saw those. He tells him this because he sees I'm getting up to the checkpoint where they're about to go through our customs. So we can enter into Egypt, and this is what's about to happen. And that puts a better perspective maybe on how did all that transpire.
I was going to say originally that Adam was not completely tending the garden as he should because there was a seed that got in. And that seed through the serpent was planted in his wife. And then it sprouted in him as well. And that seed was sin. Another point you were talking about hearing the voice, we have to be quiet enough in our spirit in order to hear
That's right.
that voice. That goes along with the distractions.
I think that's really an important point. In fact, I want to.
Tammy's next.
Oh, sorry, Tammy. Go ahead, Tammy.
Well, since you brought up, the wine being representative of the blood and the bread and flesh, when you're doing the wine, it's basically, he was saying, you're entering into a blood covenant with me.
Yeah.
And there's always a meal that follows that, which, the bread represents that meal. So every time you're doing the Shabbat service, if you do the Shabbat meal with the wine and the challah bread, you're reaffirming that blood covenant,
Right.
which has boundaries of its own.
You're right. Right.
And this it all connects us, because if we go back to what Yeshua said, like for example, in Matthew 11:15, I know this is pulling this verse out of amidst of a conversation he's having. He said, he who has ears to hear, let him hear. And I want to just, he says that more than once. Exactly right. Because, what was it that he talks about here? He talks about what
The
happened.
more obedient you are, the more you're going to hear from him.
Okay. And because this Lech Lekha has some words in the Hebrew that relates to another word, which is halak. In fact, anybody know what the Hebrew where the definition of halak is? It's walk, right? And talking about go forth from Lekh Lekha. Halak is a derivative of the word lekha. The voice, and this is where a lot of people get it wrong. A lot of people said, okay, tell me about Torah. I'm going to follow Torah. I'm going to do these things. Or tell me about Jesus. How do I follow Jesus? How do I follow Yeshua? How do I follow in this manner? And they say, like, give me a prescription in order to how to do this. A, B, C, D, E. This is how I'm going to do it. But wait a minute. Yeshua said it so many different times. He who has an ear, let him hear. So faith comes by hearing, and that by the word of Yahweh. So the voice is required for the halak. The voice is required for the walk, to walk this out. I mean, the halakha, that's one of the things that's a really big emphasis when we come into Torah and this understanding. Halakha, what's the halakha? It's what are the prescriptions of following Torah? How do we read it and do it? Okay. But the other side of it is the Agadah, which is what is the inspiration of the word. And yes, the two go hand in hand. But wait, the more important matter of it is, are we hearing his voice when we're walking this out? Are we hearing this voice? Because Abraham didn't walk. He didn't leave until he heard the voice, until he was told to go. And then he left. And so he didn't have this covenant, the dividing of the pieces, until he heard the voice. He didn't get a son, by the way, until he was promised a son but until he was circumcised. Think about that. The promise of that would be the one who would inherit everything that he had would not be his servant Eliezer. It would be his son, but he didn't have a son yet, but he had to be circumcised first. So when we think about how do we get that inheritance, that the covenant has to be cut. It is through the circumcision, and the circumcision of our heart, the circumcision of our mind has to take place, or we won't see the promise fulfilled. The obedience. So, but he had to hear the voice that inspired him to do the deed. And these are the different connections, the connections to, I want to bring this first, and I want to go back to Sandy because I don't want to cut her off from what she's doing, and because of what the point that she was wanting to make. But I want to go over to Song of Solomon's chapter 6. If you want to jump over there with me, because this really ties into that thing about what is it about that, whether we were raised with believing parents or not, we all still have to come to this decision, because ultimately a lot of times if we have believing parents, we reject their faith, and then we have to walk like I did. My parents believed, but I had to come to the point of saying, you know what, however that journey was, and I had a journey, and I was like, you know what, maybe my parents were right. And then it was like that voice that was always gnawing at me to make that decision. I had to come to the point of faith, saying, you know what? But what is Song of Solomon, chapter 6, verse 12? It says, "Before I was aware, my soul set me over the chariots of my noble people." Think about this. Before I was aware, my soul set me. In other words, before I was even aware, there was something going on inside of me that was set in the course of my life that made it more important than, and he says here, before over the chariots of my noble people. That was, I mean, coming from the perspective of the king, the author of this book with King Solomon, is like, wait a minute, there's something. What is it above all of the things I want to do in life? There's still, what is that still small voice? And am I going to listen to it? Am I going to hear it so that my life can be set into place and I can fulfill my promises, fulfill the promises that Yahweh has promised over me? And verse 13 completes it. Come back, O Shulamite. Come back, that we may gaze at you. Why should you gaze at the Shulamite as at the dance of the two companies? So, yeah.
Well, I just want, since we're talking about the voice and hearing and boundaries and all of this, let me ask this question. Has Abraham had to come out of Ur? He had to leave his father's house. Now he was told to leave and go without just him, and I don't think dad was supposed to come along.
I was just going to say, where do you come out of Ur? It came out of Ur is the word for light, but it's a false light. It's a counterfeit light. Yeah.
But so he was told to come out, to leave it all behind. Has that changed? Because go to Revelation 18:4. Let's go there. Somebody would read it real quick.
And I heard another voice out of heaven say, "My people, come out of her, so that you will not share in her sin, so that you will not be infected by her plagues."
Okay. So what was happening where Abraham they were big on idol worshipers. His own father was set the precedent, worshiping other gods. Well, let's look around us and we may say, well, we don't have other gods set up in our houses. Really? I bet if we see what's taking our time instead of our excuses for not being able to spend time with him and to hearken to his voice are idols as well. But the world and the people around us are influential, because you will become like who you hang with, period. That's why we hang with of like mind and like kind. But the word still today says, come out of her, my people. So in actuality, Abraham's life sets this precedence for our life. How did he leave? Did he leave questioning? Did he leave saying, well, I'm not sure? No, he said he did it. He got up and he left. And his example is for us today. Are we coming out of her, my people? And for us tomorrow, come out of her, my people, because there's a day and an hour where we're going to be told very soon, whatever it looks like, that we need to leave everything behind us and go. Are we really able to do that? Because our ability to come out of her or exit Babylon is really going to rely on our ability to hear him, to hear his word, to be obedient to what we've heard. And that's the difference. Oftentimes we hear and we're not obedient to that hearing. So you can't say you've heard and then do the opposite thing, because our life, we're Hebrew. That means our actions show what we truly believe and what we truly think. But one of the biggest phrases that we hear is he who hath an ear, let him hear. As Pastor John is talking about, that Shema, that listen and do. Now, I want us to understand, when we get a message, like if I'm giving a message to Jonathan or to you, within that word is going to be the character of who I am and the authority, whatever it is that I carry in your life or not. And then, so if the word that is spoken, the word from Yah that is spoken, it shows his character and shows his authority, then our obedience to hear and do and to that word functions as a remembrance of honor and respect and true belief of him. So, just like if I say, I'll give an example. I spoke to somebody recently and I said, no, I love you, but this one teeniest little thing we need to look at. And that person, you know what that person did? That person honored my word and honored my position in that person's life, because that person loved me, but also respected the position from which I'm at. How much more Yahweh speaking that word to us? Because our failure then to honor his word, to hear, to hearken, and hearing means doing, means that we do not honor or respect him, and that we do not give his word authority. Abraham's life is that example of just somebody who gets up and does it. So we're going back and we're saying the same thing over and over, but yet we're not, because we're laying this foundation of building that up. So if you realize that his word carries his authority and your act and his character, because is he going to do something to harm you? No, he says, I know the plans I plan for you, says Yahweh. Plans to prosper you, not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future. That means I know the plans I plan. He knows the plans that he is planning for your life. And because of that, his character and authority, of course, are true. And he's sovereign. He is the king. He is supposed to be king of our lives if we've given our life over. So we need to be obedient to that word. So the significance of our hearing is great. And we literally carry that word to give it life. But the enemy is going to come around and say, are you sure that's what was said? Or it looks better over here. Maybe even question Yah's authority in the middle of it. Yeah, wait on that. And what if I told Jonathan this while I was raising him, and I said, delayed obedience is, you want to finish that? And I tell Amarillo the same thing. Delayed obedience is disobedience.
Well, we have to look at Yah as a supreme being, and don't try to put him as a man, because he's not. He is a spirit. Now, he came as a man, but he's still a spirit. He is supernatural. He is out of this world. He's in this world and he's out of this world. So, we should be on our face, literally, sometimes in our prayer closet, flat out, and, going to him and talking to him. And, you got to lay yourself down for him.
That's right. And in fact, the same words of Shema is you hear is amas, and it means to carry, to load the task of carrying a load or burden. So what burden are we carrying? We're the burden. He says, my yoke is easy and my burden is light. So what are we to be carrying? We are supposed to be carrying his commands, because those commands are supposed to be etched on our heart and in our lives, because we're the living, walking Torah scroll. We are the light. We are the salt. So what burden are we carrying? We're carrying that very thing that we're supposed to take to the nations. And we are supposed to take to those around it, that we're supposed to live it out loud. And we carry that word. We give it life, and it becomes a memorial to Yahweh himself. And when we don't carry it, when we don't live it out, when we compromise that, we are memorial to Hasatan, because we can't have our feet in two worlds. Romans 10 said, as we talked about, so faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word. So hearing happens first, but when we are not walking that out, what are we doing? We're carrying somebody else's burden, and we can't do it part way. We've got to realize that what he's asked us to, as nothing of what he's done for us, but yet we find it difficult and complain about the little that he asked for us. He's given his life for us. He's given his word to live upon, and we make a mess of our lives and of our circumstances because we're not obedient. And then we point the finger at him and blame him because, Yahweh, you didn't do this or you didn't do that. But when in reality, we're living with the consequences of our own sin and compromise. And so our hearing, the voice we're hearing, is really evident on how we live our life, how we respond to each other, how we love each other, how we live it out. And that compromise of hearing enslaves us. And the key to being set free is we've got to come out of her. Come out of her, my people. Come out of that lifestyle. Come out of that way. Come out of those friends. Come out of those ways. Come out of those habits. Come out. And because he said, Yeshua said, when you look at Luke 8:18, it says, take heed therefore how ye hear, for whosoever hath, to him shall be given, and whosoever hath not, from him shall be taken even that which he seemeth to have. So then let's go back. Are we guarding? Are we guarding the way he says? Are we carrying his word? Are we living it out? Are we hearkening to his voice? Are we coming out of her, my people? Because that's what we see in Abraham. Sorry, Pastor John.
No, it's good. No, and I want to take this to this, because you were talking about over there in Revelation chapter 18, and we can also go over to thinking about some in one of the letters that Paul wrote. But when we come out of her, we come out of Babylon, we exit Babylon, and I liked what Jackie's version said. So, so that you're not infected by the plagues. That's a powerful word, as opposed to mine says not receive of her plagues, but not infected of her plagues. I think that's very interesting. And but if we think about what Abraham was doing, is he's being called out of where? Babylon. And where is he to the promised land? This Lech Lekha, which we see if you're looking in your English versions, where like in the King James it says get thee out of thy country, that is the Lekh Lekha. So it's actually seems to be a repeat, and I need to look at it in the Hebrew, but it's Lekh Lekha. So we have to think about it as it's urgent. Get out now. Double time it. It's very important that you do this, because it's really telling us there's demands on personal action for benefit, not just for leaving Babylon, but for pursuing inheritance. It's not just to get out. I mean, a lot of times we like to think, I want to be preserved during the time of the Great Tribulation, so I'm going to come out of Babylon. What does that mean? Do we go live in tents? Or is it that I am coming out in order to enter in?
My soul's
It's spiritual, I think, but it's also, I think there's a natural connection. Abraham received a natural promises that besides this all of a sudden this relationship with the Most High that we don't see within the scriptures itself, but all of a sudden explodes in his life. I mean, he has this. What did we read over there in the Song of Solomon, where it says what did it say about the soul? Before I was aware, my soul set me. Before I was aware, there's something going on, but boom, then something happened, and it was like, get up, get out now, right? Tammy.
I have my knock here. I look and it's Lekh Lekha, which is Lekh.
Uh-huh.
We've got the little line that connects them together.
Okay.
It's probably significance there too. Because they are connected together, make them as one.
Maybe one was soul, spirit, and the other was physical. So we're gonna get all of you out.
That's an interesting thought. Yeah. So very interesting thought. It's, in other words, don't be like Lot's wife where you're still looking back. Yeah, right. So interesting thought there, Terry. That was good. So get thee out of thy country. There was a connection we're going to be going into as we've been studying out the book of Jubilees. Anybody connect, by the way, to Walking in Spirit and Truth this week? You listened to it?
I listened to it a couple times.
A couple times. I'm saying with this, go back and listen to this last week's Walking in Spirit and Truth. It's very interesting. I did talk about the two trees. I did go into a little bit about that. Some of the things I talked about, Adam and his relationship, watching his wife eat the fruit and what happened. And that was in Jubilee, in the book of Jubilees. But also in the book of Jubilees, there's something else, and we'll be going into it when we get there, about this of Abraham's call and his rejection to idolatry. And because it was directly related to the hearing of the divine voice, it's directly hearing it, get this, in the midst of distraction, that somehow our soul is still set, his spirit still speaking to us in the midst of all the distraction, in the midst of all the noise that's going on. Because I want to tell you, Abraham, if you pause to think about the time period, he was raised during the time period of the Tower of Babel.
Mm-hmm. Nimrod and all of it.
And how much distraction that was going on at that point in time. And let alone, if you go into Jasher, you see how Yahweh had to preserve his life because Nimrod himself was coming out against him. And that's also another dimension to consider and look at, and with all that he was having to battle. But if you think about that, how much more, or how much more was the calling to leave that much more powerful in his life? So like, I've gone through a lot of stuff living over in this area. Let's just make the move. Let's just jump in to this whole thing,
But on his first leaving, would he be like that, or would he be so disgusted with the evil that's there that he's ready to go?
Mm-hmm.
Because then he ends up in Haran, and he doesn't just go from there to Haran and then leave. He's there for a while.
Yeah. Well, it took the death of Terah, right? His dad. Yeshua even gave us that. He said that anyone. He said, "Well, wait, let us go bury my parents." It's like, well, then you're not fit for the kingdom. And we think
Because it's delayed obedience.
it's delayed obedience. Yeah.
But he's at the point, he had nothing to lose. Why not? But it comes down to he was obedient to main word, obedience.
Yeah. Right. But that obedience led to the appearance. Like in chapter 12, verse 7, and Yahweh appeared to Avram and said, to your descendants I'll give this land. So this is after he arrived in the land, and he was at the Oak of Moreh, and then so Avram built an altar before Yahweh, who had appeared to him. So it says, and Yahweh appeared to him, and he built an altar to Yahweh who appeared to him. Now, do you think that's significant?
Every altar that he built has meaning and purpose.
And that word, that Hebrew word for appeared, is ra'ah. And we've mentioned that how many different times. We talked about Abraham when he went and got up on top of the mountain before he died. He ra'ah. He saw more than what his physical eyes could see. He was able to see into this realm that was even bigger than what he could visually see. And when you go up on those mountains, not that I've been up on the mountains, but if you go to Israel and you look at the mountains that are on the other side of the River Jordan, that are in Jordan, and you think about, well, I wonder what the view of the land would be if I went on top of the mountain and look back at the land of Israel on a clear day. What would I see? What you could see, you would be able to see all the way to the Mediterranean. You would see this big thing, but the physical reality of seeing that much more, and says, and Yahweh appeared to Abraham. What did Abraham see? First off, is this I want to use a religious term, is this a Christophany? Is this an appearance of Messiah? When Yahweh appeared to him, because it's not just there's also an appearance to him when we go and we look at the battle, after the battle, and it's after at the time of the splitting of the pieces, we have an appearance of Yahweh to him, and also at the circumcision of his circumcision, because the three visitors appeared to him.
I asked the Lord, because I was in a heavy prayer thing one night. I said, really, if I could just see what you look like, Lord, because there's, and I was just in this weird state. So sure enough, the next week he pointed me to Ezekiel, and in Ezekiel, his matter was half fire on the bottom and half fire on the top. Also, it says in another scripture, he had silver hair and his eyes were like fire and his feet was bronze. And then also he came as a man. That's another appearance, so it's like, we won't know till he comes back to earth. But to think that he would manifest to whatever situation he needs to manifest in to reveal himself, that shows you how awesome he is. I mean, yes, the burning bush, that's another example. So, I mean, he's so awesome, we can't even imagine. But I mean, that's like, I never thought of him like full fire. That's his power. That's his, there are no words hardly. Yes, that's another example.
So
So exciting.
when Yahweh appears to him, what's he do? He builds an altar, right?
Yeah.
So what is it about the altar? What makes that significant?
Honor. Fire. Oh, that too. Yeah. Yeah.
The source of warmth.
And an altar is where you put your sacrifice. So he makes a sacrifice to Yahweh. So what is it that when one makes a sacrifice, there's blood covenant, but what is that act of? It's an act of worship.
Yes.
Right. So it's an act of worship. So in 12:7, he builds an altar because Yahweh appeared to him in worship. But go down to the next verse. Then he proceeded from there to the mountain on the east of Bethel, and he pitched his tent with Bethel on the west and Ai in the east. And there he built an altar to Yahweh. And what's he do next? and he called on the name.
Fire also burns away impurities. So I'd almost think it's kind of a way of not only are you offering like sacrifice, but it's like into the fire, as it were, like my way versus your way. Like here, I'm offering this as I'm getting out of my way, to give to you these things as a way to purify, clean, like kind of like how the heads would come in there to like pray for the nation. So there would be some of purity is the right word, but like cleansing, as it were. I don't know if the oils and the waters and the fire are all kind of linked to that, but I feel like it has a significant meaning to like our inside and our cognitiveness and our flesh and everything. It's almost like a symbolic act of like almost like throwing yourself on the altar, as it were, like a clay jar shattering or so on and so forth. Like, what happens when I have the oil stored, to bring to the altar, I don't know. I just, in a similar sense, is that a way to look at it too, or is that just
Sure.
what we're thinking?
Yeah, I think because we're seeing these things in all these different dimensions for sure.
Burn away the unclean,
Mm-hmm.
make way for something fresh.
And that takes us back to Romans 12:1, which is that we are living sacrifices, where we want to keep that in mind. And I think that goes right along with that. Yeah, Terry.
When you burn something, whether it's grass or something on a campfire, you add nitrogen. It causes nitrogen. When Yahweh sends the lightning in a thunderstorm that cleanses the air, it adds nitrogen to it.
Mm-hmm.
So it adds his nitrogen to us so that we can grow more.
Okay. Yeah.
Wow,
So we're fruitful.
plants
Yeah.
become more greener after a thunderstorm that has a lot of lightning.
Yeah. That's why we put our copper antennas into our garden, which is to attract that nitrogen, especially when there's storms in the area. Yeah. Which I think also contributed to the very prolific garden we had this year. And now this word for call, he called on Yahweh, called upon the name of Yahweh, the word is kara. And in the Paleo Hebrew, it's made up of the kaf and the resh. And so the kaf, if you look in the Paleo Hebrew, it's a picture of the sun that's on the horizon. So it's a circle with a line through it. So in other words, when you look at the sun on the horizon, you know that you can see the top part, but what don't you see? But you know it's there, the bottom half of the circle, right? And so it's kind of interesting. So think about this. It's a picture of the sun on the horizon, and so and the gathering of light. It can be a sunrise or a sunset, by the way. You can look at it both ways. And then the picture of the head of a man combined, it means this: gather them in. Gather them in. So it is to call. So this is the root of this word, to call upon the name of Yahweh. But it's also, you might think of it, it's calling for a meeting, the gathering of the men. Or in this case with Abraham, so he goes to this other place, he makes an altar, and what's he doing? He wants a meeting. He wants a meeting with Yahweh. And of all different things, if you want to put in this perspective of the idea of a rainbow, there's so much built into just simply the picture of the rainbow, not just the picture of the rainbow, but the colors of the rainbow and the things that make a rainbow, but it's all connected to covenant. But did you know, when you look at that rainbow, and I showed that picture online to everybody last week about the picture that I got at Sukkot of the rainbow, and it seemed to be just like a quarter of a rainbow. But sometimes you can get out here in these flat West Texas plains when there's a thunderstorm that goes through, and you'll see a rainbow that goes from one side all the way up and over down to the other side.
Like that.
But did you know that a rainbow is actually a full circle?
Yes.
A rainbow is a full circle showing the completeness of the covenant. And yet we only see one side of it, but it's the idea of this half of a circle, but there's more to the other side. But so what we see in the natural, there's something that we don't see, because in the spiritual realm, we know by faith that it's there. We know that the other side of the sun on the horizon is there. Why? Because we know that before it sets, it's there and it just disappears. Or when it's rising up, we're going to see the full thing. In other words, there's something that we can look into, that is, when we call upon the name of Yahweh, there is something that's leading us, uh, that's in our presence, but is also in our future. If you look at it in terms of something that's rising on the horizon, if something is on, when we call upon Yahweh, he's going to speak to our past, because maybe the sun is setting and we know that we can't see it, but it was there. So in our past, we saw it, but in our future, as in the sun rising, that there's more to the story. We can see something that's right before our eyes. We might see the problem, but we need to see the solution. Because if we're thinking about the dawning effect, and when Yahweh is allow his light to arise and to shine upon us, then we know that there's the solution is coming. I'm awakening to my problems. Who wakes up in the morning and think about everything that needs to be done, all the different problems that we might be having in life, all the shortfalls in our life? Oh, I got to live another day with this on my mind. But wait a minute. What don't I see that's about to appear? What am I waiting for? And this whole idea of Abraham going and building this altar to meet, he's calling a meeting saying, okay, I'm here in the land. You called me to this land. What do I do next? But maybe one of the things that he's saying, I'm in the land, but there's a drought going on. I got to feed my sheep. And so he's like, what do I do? Well, he goes to Egypt after that. But Terry.
So does the rainbow completely circle the whole earth?
Not from what the pilots have seen up in the air,
No, it's
because
general certain radius.
yeah, it's certain radius. Because they see it, that's how they know it's supposed to be a complete circle, because they have seen it while they were flying through the moisture and the sun created the rainbow, that it's a complete circle.
So it depends on your perspective. And that's really what you have to look at. What is the perspective? But the promises that are above they are complete in him with that which we can't see. So I think that's a pretty unique thing that for us to consider. Lech Lecha. There's also a connection with the root of the word. So we talked about halak, which is the word of it in of itself, but also the root of the word, which is the lamed aleph. It connects us to Strong's 3212, well, which is the root of which is yalak. What does yalak connect us to? It goes back to the idea of the teaching or the Torah or the instructions. So our walk, we were talking about this earlier, our walk is dependent upon the Torah, but it's because we hear the voice that leads us through this walk. It leads us on this journey. And you also have to kind of look at it in terms of a journey that in order to make a journey, who gets to go on vacation without paying anything? Has anybody ever gone on vacation, didn't have to pay anything?
Maybe.
The babies, in essence, are paying for their journey through their parents. You might say that, but yeah, you could say that. But if we want to take a vacation, if we want to take a journey, if we're going to go to a particular place that we like going to, it doesn't come without a price.
You have to eat, that costs money.
You got to eat, got to pay for fuel, you got to pay for room.
Even if you go 10 out, you're gonna have.
You're
to
still got to
pay.
pay. You got to pay
Yeah.
for your campsite, all of it. So there's a price. There's a charge. What about everything that costs to prepare for the journey? What about the other costs along the journey? So having this covenant relationship Most High, in order to realize that when we leave and we go on this destination, it's not just because we're leaving Babylon, is that we are pursuing an inheritance. Now, when we go on a vacation, it's like, well, I'm going to come back again. But when we exodus, we won't come back. But everything comes with a cost. Everything is not without a price. And what is our price that we pay? In fact, Pastor Sandy said this earlier, that when Abraham and Avram and Sarai ended up in Egypt, what did they recognize about Avram? And they would then recognize all that he had, but he had also recognized Avram's wife, Sarai. And that's why he said, well, look, they're going to see that you're really beautiful. They're going to snag you up for the Pharaoh. But what did they do? They came to a toll. There's always a toll.
That's what I was trying to say, customs toll, yeah.
Yeah, there's a toll. There's a toll fee. There's a price to be paid. If you want to enter into the land, you're going to have to pay the price. And we're going to decide. And in fact, we'll probably take our share out of what's going to go to Pharaoh. If you go to other countries, did you know in the Ivory Coast, by the way, if as a young person that was of driving age, 18 years old, you had to be 18 to drive down there. I was listening to a gentleman that was part of the oil family community, and he was Dutch, and he said, yeah, I always bring with me, I always have in my car a bottle of whiskey, and I think he said like $100 or something like that. Why? Because inevitably, what police would do, the police were everywhere, they would pull over a vehicle that had white people in it, not maybe because they would violate the law, but more than not just because there was a violation. Maybe there wasn't a violation, is they were going to make something up, because what they could do is they knew they could get something out of them. So, well, what did I do? Well, you ran the red light, or you merged you didn't use your signal, or yet nobody uses their signals driving in the Ivory Coast, in Abidjan. Was a very interesting place to drive, shall I say.
Yeah.
And
That's they use the turning signal.
maybe you used it. Yeah. You did use your turn signal. And
Tell the ones that were not from there that use signal.
But they were wanting to exact a fee. And maybe there was a violation, and that violation could end you up in jail,
And that bottle of whiskey will get you out of it.
and that bottle of whiskey may even prevent you from going to jail. That bottle of whiskey meant you didn't have to pay 5 tolls for everybody that's in the loop in that bureaucracy in order to get you out of that jail. And so I kept that in mind. I know this is a little bit of a rabbit trail, but a friend of mine and I were driving, and we were just driving around trying to figure things out. We found out we were in a part of town that probably wasn't the best part of town to be in. And it was like during the day, there's not a lot of people out. But when we got down there in that time of day, which is around sunset, boy, there were so many crowds of people walking around. They're all looking at us in the car like, what are these 2 white boys doing in this car driving around? And I was driving. I got pulled over. I'm like, I don't know what I did. And I rolled down the window, and he starts speaking French, because they speak French. And I'm thinking in my head, I don't have a bottle of whiskey and I don't have $100. What am I going to do? And then he looked at it like, oh, you're just kids. Just go on. Oh my goodness. Okay. So I didn't have to pay the toll at that point in time. But what is it? What is the toll? What is it, the toll that we pay? What is it about this walk that cost us?
Sometimes it costs us family, sometimes it costs us friendships, sometimes both, or even jobs.
Yeah. It can cost
It's
us all
very
that.
well worth it. When you live a long life, you realize how worth it is.
2 to 84 meters is the average diameter rainbow circumference.
How much?
72 to 84 meters, whatever that is,
Okay.
in a circumference. I don't know
And the
what meter.
so Pastor Sandy already brought out this Revelation 18:4, come out of her, my people.
72 meters.
How much is that?
236.22 feet.
Oh,
Inches.
that's definitely bigger than me.
There's something else that's kind of interesting too, by the way, in this Torah portion, and it's also there's I haven't read this, but in this reference was brought up, and it's about the testament of Abraham, and about listening and hearing, and we see in we really don't see it here. We don't see it until chapter 15. So would someone read chapter 15 verses 1 through 6? No, 1 through 7. Okay.
Sometime later, the word of Yehovah came to Abram in a vision. Don't be afraid, Abram. I am your protector. Your reward will be very great. Abram replied, Yehovah Elohim, what good will your gifts be to me if I continue childless? And Eliezer,
I always say Eliezer.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Says, inherits my possessions. You haven't given me a child, Abram continued. So someone born in my house will be my heir. But the word of Yehovah came to him. This man will not be your heir. No, your heir will be a child from your own body. Then he brought him outside and said, look at the sky and count the stars. If you can count them, your descendants will be that many. He believed in Yehovah and he credited it to him as righteousness. Then he said to him, I and Yehovah have brought you out of Ur Kasdim to give you this land as your possession.
Okay. So again, it's going back. And he's mentioning, I brought you out of this place that is, or I mean, of course, in the Babylonian language, it would mean something else, but which I didn't look up. But or is light, but it would be a land of false light. And however, think about this. Avram, I guess he's in his tent, and it's night, and Yahweh came to Avram in a vision. Again, he's, it was like another appearance of Yahweh in his dream, in this dream-like state, by the way, kind of like at the cutting of the pieces. Go ahead.
At the very beginning, he said something about Abraham had burned the idols in his father's house before they left.
Mm-hmm.
So he couldn't be followed. Because just like Rachel took her father's idols, so he couldn't see where they had gone. That way they couldn't see where Abraham had gone.
Mm. That's a very interesting point. I mean, yeah.
That are involved in the occult, they use those to see.
He burned his GPS.
It's the tracker, the GPS tracker.
The tracker. Yeah. Isn't it interesting too that he made friends with the Amorites when he was in the land, because it was the Amorites and the Amorite, the brother of Eshcol, and the brother of Aner, and these were the allies with Abraham. That's in chapter 14, verse 13. Amar means to speak. Amar means to speak. The Amorites were a people, they were a pagan people in the lands. And so if you have this pagan people, and they're called the Amorites, the relationship of that word Amorites, if you go to the root of it, to Amar, is to speak. It would be the people, or more so, like a soothsayer, one who sees to say, one who has perhaps an occult ability to perceive and to foretell, like a soothsayer. It's interesting in the root of Amorite. I didn't think about that until I was studying it out, and that this is one of his friends, one of the ones who went with him, with Abraham's 318 men, to pursue these 5 kings in order to bring back Lot and those that are held in captivity and the loot that they had taken. So,
Well, I think even Saul's wife went to a, what you call them, sayer.
soothsayer.
Yeah, and she saw Saul was going down and she still wanted to keep the kingdom. So, you know,
The
they
reason
had some evil power back then.
the reason I say this is that because what did the Watchers do? What was one of the things that the Watchers did? And I talked about this in walking this last week.
They gave all sorts of goodies to humans that they weren't supposed to have yet.
And part of those goodies was their ability to understand sorceries. When they got together with the human women in order for the human women to have their babies, they taught them many things, right?
The other things too.
And
Bunch of things they taught them.
one of those things was the understanding or perceiving that which is in another dimension in order to harness those energies, those powers for their purposes, right? Captain sorcery. 200 of them were the fallen ones that did get together with the human women.
Okay.
And then they were and
Giants,
they produced the giants.
And that was basically the only amount. Like there was no extra others that tried to make right or whatever. I don't know. But that was basically the ones known as the fallen ones, correct?
These are the ones that were the fallen.
Yeah,
Yes,
okay.
the fallen. Yes. So
I did not hear.
so now, what is it about being in the land of Babylon? When you go and you look at, for example, let's look at Daniel. What did Daniel teach so that the wise men would have the knowledge and understanding? Okay, there was something about understanding the message that was in the stars that Daniel taught, that those that would eventually know that the time of Messiah had come, that they would know where to go, right? Okay, so understanding the stars, understanding the message that's in the stars is very important to know. In the climate that Abraham was raised in, what would we call that, knowing that this was the land of Babylon? This was where the Tower of Babel was. This is where all of the idols were. What would the religious leaders of the days be doing like they do today, like certain occult religious leaders do today? What do they follow? They follow the stars. They follow the astrological signs. They follow, right? Well, there was something different though, and this is actually clarified in the book of Jubilees, that even though Avram lived in the midst of that type of the dark arts, is that the angels came to Avram and told him how to rightly understand the constellations and the message of the stars. So when we look at this in chapter 15, it's where it says, and Yahweh took him outside, which is pretty wild to me. It says, then behold, the word of Yahweh came to him, saying, this man will not be your heir, but the one who shall come forth from your body shall be your heir. And he took him outside and said, now look toward the heavens and count the stars if you're able to count. And he said to him, so shall your descendants be. And so is he just simply saying, okay, look at the sheer quantity of stars up there? Or is he saying something else?
He's saying all your descendants will go on and on and on because you were the original.
Shall he just say, is it like saying, I want you to connect the dots? Here is, I was thinking about this, put it on the shelf. Maybe there's a connection to this, maybe not, because I don't know the etymology or the root source of the word zodiac. But did you know that the root, the 3 letters root of that zodiac is, because a lot of times we associate that with the occult, we associate that with astrology, and that the Z, the D, and the K would also be the root letters of Zedek, which is what? Righteous, right? Or a righteous person, a righteous man. And then we have this verse that just pops up right after that. And it says in verse 6, then he believed in Yahweh and he reckoned it to him as righteousness. Now, is there a connection that Abraham now can rightly, because he understands how to read what Yahweh had put, to put the whole message of the kingdom in the heavenly realms? And because he could rightly read what the constellations were saying, and probably in particular the time of year that he's looking up to the stars, but the other part of it is that perhaps he said, I want you to see the stars. We know that in our studies in the past, that if you look at the 12 different constellations, that there's one constellation that lines up with each one of the 12 tribes of Israel, each one appearing at its proper month and its proper season. That's why there's only 12, and there's never an additional constellation thrown in there, because you have to, because just simply because there's an extra Adar on a particular calendar, there's not an extra constellation that pops up that year. So you only to get each 12 constellations means that gives you a 30-day month. Just saying that's how it works out. Each one aligning with a particular tribe, each one aligning with a particular season, for us to really to know and to understand. And what is Abraham looking at that point in time when he's looking at this? Because now he sees the whole Beserah. He sees the whole message of the kingdom that is being presented before him. Which, by the way, when you look at the word, going back to halak, I think it was, also connected to kingdom, because one of the derivations of the word is melech. Okay, I want you to say halak, melech. What happens? You change a letter. You change a letter of the word. When you change from halak and you put in the mem and you have melech, and what do you have? Melech is a word for messenger, but is also a message for a word for king. So our walk ties us to kingdom. Our walk ties us to the king if we choose to hear that message of the kingdom, if we choose to walk it out and listen to him. So my goodness. So when Abraham is now looking up and he's seeing the message of the stars, and it's now credited to him as righteousness, what's he seeing? He's seeing the kingly message of the stars, or if you want to put those words together, the Melchizedek. He sees it right there in the heavenly realms, because and it's all because he chose to follow or to go on this journey in order for him to receive the inheritance. It wasn't just to leave the land. It was so that he could inherit the promise. And that is the connection of that covenant piece. And that brings us to a close because our time is up. So did y'all get something out of that today? Yep. And all right. So everybody that's online, we would love for you to come join us at 3 p.m. Central Time as we will continue our worship service. Our encounter service will be at 3, and for a time of praise, worship, and ministry. And we will then cut it off, reset, and follow up our encounter service with our message following that. So it is great to be with you guys, and we hope to see you on the other side. pass on the word, like, share, and subscribe if you think it was worthwhile to be with us. And we will see you.